Itachi versus Pain has been one of the most highly debated fights amongst the Naruto community, probably even more so than Itachi versus Obito. So today, I thought I might as well cover it too, especially since most of my subscribers have wanted me to do this fight anyway. The versions of this fight I'm going to do are a live, healthy Itachi versus the 6 Paths of Pain, and Edo Itachi and Nagato. I know a healthy Itachi doesn't exist in the series, but whenever I cover a healthy Itachi in versus battle videos, I typically use 5 Kage Summit Sasuke as a reference point. Not so much in skill and strength, but rather chakra reserves and Sharingan duration. Since this was only the second time Sasuke used his MS, and he had it on spam mode, using pretty much everything in his arsenal, specifically his monk and Sharingan abilities, he started to go blind by the end of the arc itself, which, to be frank, was a long time and a good fair uses of his Manga Sharingan. But that said, it is up to you whether or not you want to use it as a good reference point or not for Itachi, but in this case, that's what I'm going with. The setting of the fight is going to take place in an open field, similar to how Naruto fought Pain during the invasion arc, just to give the most fairness to both opponents. One thing to point out before the fight starts is knowledge. Y'all know I'm a stickler when it comes to how intel plays a part in versus battle videos. Given that Pain is a pseudo-leader of the Akatsuki and that Itachi is a very intelligent and resourceful person, it's fair to assume both sides would have a pretty solid amount of intel on each other. To what extent? I'm not really sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if they know a good bit about each other. Now, when it comes to how most takes on this fight go, the thing that most people say is that Itachi doesn't have the stamina to keep up with or handle the 6 Paths of Pain all at the same time. Which, when using the in-canon Itachi, they're definitely not wrong. But again, if we're using the 5 Kage Summit Sasuke as a reference point, then Itachi could perform for a lot longer period of time than he otherwise would. Now, even that said, Itachi is going to have to primarily rely on his Manga Sharingan abilities in order to fight Pain. I think we can all agree that just his base Sharingan and his base abilities aren't going to cut it. Now, Itachi may actually have enough chakra in his healthy state to make 5 clones in order to match the paths in numbers. And while I do think he can maintain them for a decent period of time, his best option is going to be to use his ability to detonate the clones on command. In all honesty, if he plays it smart, he realistically could do that to every path, with the exception of maybe the Preta path, since he could possibly absorb the clone. I don't know if an explosion from Itachi's clones would 100% be enough to shut each Pain down though. I want to say yes, but then when it came to the Asura path, it got hit with both Chosa's giant hand and Kakashi's Raikiri, and was still able to both move and fire a missile at Choji. But then the Naruto path was taken out by a base Rasengan from Konohamaru, so yeah, durability of the paths may differ a good bit. Let's say for a moment that it does play out that way, then all Itachi would have to deal with is the Diva path. Now, the Diva path was strong enough to last in a fight with Naruto in both Sage Mode and Six Tails, and was actually doing pretty well. I mean, when it came to the Six Tails, he kinda did get steamrolled a bit, but again, considering who was fighting, I think it's very impressive at how far he got. Now, if the rest of the Paths of Pain are down for the count, Pain wouldn't have any restrictions of using a similar almighty push like the one that leveled the Leaf Village, and assuming Itachi throws up a Susanoo to realistically defend against it, I want to say that with the Yadamir, Itachi should be able to do so. I mean, at the very least, Itachi should be in a similar state to how he was when he blocked Kirin, because it's arguable that the destructive force between Almighty Push that leveled the village and Kirin are similar. If we assume that, then Pain at this point would be severely weakened, similar to how he was at the beginning of the fight with Naruto, only this time, he wouldn't have any other Paths of Pain to back him up. However, at the same time, I don't think Itachi would be feeling the best either. But as he started the fight in a healthier state, there is a chance that he'd be at least in a better shape than he was when he fought Sasuke after Kirin. Both combatants would be on their last legs, but I think in this scenario, Itachi would be able to make it out alive with Amaterasu, since at this point, Pain wouldn't have any almighty pushes to use since he'd be on a lot longer cooldown time. Not saying Pain couldn't still dodge it, but without Shinra Tensei to rely on, I feel Itachi could set up a strategy to land Amaterasu successfully. However, instead of Pain using super almighty push against Itachi once all the paths are down, he could use Chibaku Tensei to lock Itachi up instead. Something that's been debated on is whether or not Itachi's Yasaka beads could break Chibaku Tensei on its own. People have often said when he, Naruto, and B did so in the war arc, Itachi asked for their help to be sure that they destroyed it, but that there's a chance Itachi could muster enough firepower to do so on his own. I'm not necessarily knocking the theory, but I do think the implication of the scene is to say that if Itachi could have done it himself, he would have just done it anyway. So if we go with that scenario, then I can't see Itachi getting himself out of that situation, in which case Pain wins. So in this side of the battle, if Pain decides to use Almighty Push, Itachi will end up winning. If you use Chibaku Tensei, Pain will end up winning. Now, Let's rewind the fight a bit and say that the exploding shadow clones option doesn't play out so great and Itachi still has to fight all the 6 paths of pain. Taking them all on 1v6 without a Susanoo would be a huge hassle, especially if there's a risk that Pain decides to use the animal summons right off the bat. Amaterasu might still play a part in this 1v6, but with the extended field of vision, the Predator Pass Jutsu absorption, and the Diva Pass being able to use Almighty Push more frequently than the last scenario, I feel like Itachi would just be wasting his chakra trying to land Amaterasu. So in my opinion, his best option is definitely to throw up the Susanoo, but at that point, Pain would definitely pull out the animal summons. I'm not sure how many Pain can summon at one time, but in the War Arc, he summoned 2 at once. So if we assume for fairness sake, he only has 2 at a time that he can summon right off the bat, the giant bird and the multi-headed dog specifically are going to be a problem. The bird itself is going to cause a problem because the Osteropath can just hop on and shoot missiles and laser beams from every side of the Susanoo that isn't the Yatamir. Meanwhile, the dog is possibly doing the same thing. Now, with such a big target, it should be easy for Itachi to seal it with the Totsuka Blade. But in the meantime, Pain can summon more summons, a couple more at a time, and just keep up the attack. I would say it's possible for Itachi to fire Amaterasu while in the Susanoo toward the animal path in order to stop the summons, but if the Naraka path hasn't been taken down, then it'll just be revived. Something that I want to bring up, and it's that I'm not 100% sure if the Predator path can just possibly absorb the Susanoo itself. I don't see a reason why it couldn't, since it is made of chakra, and the Rinnegan itself is able to absorb jutsus like the particle style, for example, that just attacks things on a molecular level. The problem is that getting too close to Itachi's Susanoo is dangerous, but as I've said, if the Osteropath is on a bird firing missiles and whatnot, and any of the other animal summons are attacking it, and the other paths of pain are assaulting it from the side, then I feel like eventually Itachi's Susanoo is going to get broken through. At least in enough time for the Diva Path to universal pull Itachi right out of the Susanoo, like in an opening or something. Without his Susanoo, I don't know if Itachi himself can handle all 6 paths of pain, plus the animal summons that are still in the field. That's really not even mentioning the fact that while he's relying on the Susanoo, assuming he's used it for the majority of the fight, then Itachi's going to be hurting from the cells in his body, from the Susanoo usage, and possibly losing his sight. Now, I'm not saying Itachi still couldn't perform with those detriments, but it will distract him, if even only for a little bit. And a fight like this, with all these opponents, it's not going to end well for Itachi. A big point of contention is whether or not Genjutsu can and will play a part in this fight. We know that the paths of pain are susceptible to being caught in auditory Genjutsu, just like in the fight with Jiraiya. And I don't doubt that Itachi might possibly have an auditory Genjutsu in his arsenal, but I wouldn't know how one works because I've never seen him do it before. Tsukuyomi is very debatable because since the paths are just corpses, it may not affect them. Although I will say that whenever Naruto broke one of Pain's Rinnegan rods to sense where Nagato was at, Nagato did seem affected. I know that's not necessarily the same thing as Tsukuyomi, but I still found it odd that he was affected, so I thought it was worth bringing up. And again, I brought it up just to say that you never really know what Nagato is affected by. For all we know, casting Tsukuyomi on the paths could affect Nagato. You know, there's really no telling because we don't know. But there is that scene where Sasuke's Rinnegan was able to counter the infinite Tsukuyomi casted by Madara. However, I will concede that that might have been because Sasuke's Rinnegan was more powerful than Pain's. However, at the same time, I imagine that the infinite Tsukuyomi is more powerful than Itachi's, so I suppose it evens out. So, in conclusion to round 1, if the exploding shadow clone scenario plays out like I described earlier, and if Pain uses Shinra Tensei, Itachi wins. If Pain decides to use Chibaku Tensei, Pain wins. But if the exploding shadow clone situation doesn't play out, then I feel like Pain takes his high diff. I definitely do think Itachi takes out a few of the paths of pain before he goes down, but in the end, Pain will win due to Itachi either being exhausted from chakra or losing his sight. Now, when it comes to Edo Nagato versus Edo Itachi, it's even more crazy because both have insane one-shot abilities that can be used on repeat without any consequence. The benefit for Itachi in this fight is that he won't have to fight 1v6, at least not until Nagato pulls out any of the animal summons. Let's say that Nagato decides not to do so right off the bat, and just one-on-one fight. It does seem that Nagato can counter most of what Itachi has in his arsenal. For example, if Nagato isn't fast enough to outright dodge or absorb Amaterasu, if it lands on him, he can use Almighty Push to disperse the flames off of him. Most of Itachi's ninjutsu can also be blocked or absorbed, which would leave his best bet to be his Susanoo, which in this fight would definitely help since he can just use it endlessly without restraint. But the second Itachi pulls it out, Nagato's gonna do one of two things. One, either summon some animals or use planetary devastation. If it's the former, then Itachi might have an easier time just being able to cut through them, but if there's enough summons to mount an assault from all sides, then while they're doing so, Nagato can just swoop in and possibly absorb the Susanoo and try to soul steal Itachi. I say that very loosely though, since because it's Itachi, it's definitely not going to be easy to do. Plus, if Itachi can think quick enough to cover the Rinnegan in some smoke, similar to how it was in the War Arc, then he could possibly land a poke with the Totsuka blade in time to seal Nagato. That might be arguable though, since it's been debated on whether or not that was the result of Kabuto controlling Nagato, or if that was Nagato himself who got stabbed. However, if Nagato decides to use Chibaku Tensei, Itachi might be done for. Again, like I said in the Itachi vs Pain fight, I don't know if Itachi himself can replicate the amount of damage output that all three of Itachi, Naruto, and B managed to do in the War Arc. I will concede that since he can continuously use a Susanoo, that he might be able to just spam Yasaka beads to try to disrupt planetary devastation, but I do think it's more likely that Itachi himself won't be able to break it. If he is, then the fight happens pretty much the same as I described it earlier. If not though, Itachi gets sealed. But his full extent Susanoo might be enough to break out of it. However, I imagine Nagato can just increase its size if Itachi starts to do so. The Genjutsu argument is probably going to play out the same way, but being that this is Nagato's real body instead of the corpse's, it might be more likely that Itachi's Tsukuyomi could work. If it does, then in that split second, Itachi can definitely seal Nagato with the Totsuka blade. If not though, Genjutsu is kind of rendered useless. Itachi's last resort to win this fight would be Izanami, and I don't doubt that Itachi would have the means to set it up, but I also don't know if he'd risk sacrificing his Sharingan to do so. But if we're treating this fight as if it's not going to affect the story, then yeah, Itachi can set it up, pull it off, and get the W. And now that I think about it, when it comes to the animal summons, being that this is Edo Itachi, it's very likely that Itachi can just spam Amaterasu towards each summon that's on the field and pretty much render them useless. So with Edo versus Edo, I think it's a lot closer than most people would think. I think it really depends on how Nagato decides to act. I think there's definitely opportunities for Nagato to soul steal Itachi and his other best bet using Chibaku Tensei, but if he doesn't decide to use it, then I feel as though Itachi has a better means to seal Nagato with the Totsuka blade. Worst case, use Izanami. So in conclusion, for the most part, I think it's 50-50, but I think I'm going to have to give this one to Nagato like a lucky 6 out of 10. I think it's very high diff on each side, but I'm going with Nagato due to his raw power output, jutsu arsenal, and the fact that he's more likely to counter most of Itachi's respective arsenal. I know Nagato is stated to be the strongest Edo Tensei aside from Madara, but Itachi shouldn't be slept on, especially Edo Itachi. With his jutsu and how smart he is, I definitely do believe it's possible for him to win just as much as Nagato. I know that it's going to be hard to convince people of that because I have a bit of a reputation of sleeping on Itachi, whether it's alive or Edo, doesn't really matter. I usually pit him up against really unfair opponents. Like I do him dirty, you know, like with the Obito video, like in this one specifically, you know, it's really unfair. I think the best video I've made with him by far is with him and Kakashi, because I think that I said that he wins that one more often than not. But I understand that the Itachi fans do not like me. But I want to make it clear that either one of these rounds, I think Itachi loses high difficulty. Like, I don't think Pain wins this one like easy whatsoever. I think it's very close on each side, specifically Edo versus Edo. I just think that either one of them gets lucky and gets the kill or soul steal or whatever. And yeah, that's just my opinion though. So that's gonna do it for today. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I know this fight was a very hot take and I was a bit nervous to cover it, but I did the best I could. Again, I hope y'all like it either way. Thank y'all for watching the video all the way to the end. If you have, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next one, LightningSnow out.